Good evening, Sooner Nation. This is season 2021, episode 13, and part of the 2021 Sooners football playlist. My opinions are on my own and do not reflect my current workplace. I really hope everyone has had a good weekend so far. And for those of you who went to the game, hey, I hope you had a great time. OU put on a real show last night with it. As everyone saw, we really didn't gain a lot from this game. As I mentioned in my preview video, this was definitely going to be a name your score type of game. And boy, did OU do that. OU steamrolls Western Carolina 76-0. And I think we learned less from this game than we actually did against Tulane. I think the biggest set of news that we actually learned was Joe C throws some shade at the Big 12 by saying that the reason the lights weren't working later in the evening was due to all the 11 a.m. kickoffs we've had, and they haven't had time to actually utilize those lights. Just in a brief summary, because I want to keep this video very, very brief for y'all, since I did not watch it and I was only able to gather so much information from watching replays, Twitter, the drives, the box scores, and just articles written about it. Again, OU took care of business. This is the way against an FCS team and took time to really give a lot of guys a lot of reps and just really start settling in of what the O-line and the D-line is going to look like. As of today, OU moved up to number 3 in the AP poll. Based on the pictures I saw from last night, it seems like we had a packed house, which I'm not surprised because it's been almost 2 years since we've had one due to the pandemic. So everyone got really, really patriotic. We really saw how the new version of striping the stadium looked like an American flag, and it really came out really, really nicely for it. So kudos to the crowd for really, really showing up for that. As well as, I think the other thing with it was, if we talked about Joe C kind of being the biggest highlight of the game, I think the other biggest highlight would probably be that they shortened the game to only 12 minutes in the fourth quarter, like a high school game at that point. I think Western Carolina was just ready to call it done, take the money that they got, and just head back home at this point with it, which who can blame them? Again, it's an honor to play the high-tiered teams like OU, Alabama, but Western Carolina knew that there was just a complete mismatch on talent, and who wants to have another probably 14 to 21 points thrown on them at that point? So before we kind of go over a brief look at the offense on the defense, someone brought up an idea that I really, really enjoyed, and maybe sometime in the future, the teams will incorporate this. A lot of people complain, like, for the amount that we're paying for season tickets, having an SCS team on the schedule really, really is not really good for the ticket season holders and not really good for the fans just in general. It's one of those, sure, you take your family to this game, and this is where like a lot of people like find that they enjoy the team that they're rooting for at that point. But as like someone who's paying for the tickets, it's not something that they really want to pay for it, especially too for the fans who can't even watch it due to pay-per-view and it's very, very limited market, as well as the problems that apparently there was with the video stream last night from multiple people yet again. But that's for them. I did not watch the game with it. But someone brought up a good suggestion of, if we want to bring these FCS teams in so they can make money, improve their programs, bring players, and just open up recruiting, why not, instead of having our normal spring game where it's just a glorified scrimmage, and bring in the FCS teams and have kind of a low-key spring game, actually have a real game against these teams? Sure, most of the times they're going to lose, but hey, that's still giving people content and giving them some football at least for 4 to 5 months before we really get back into it for the rest of the year. If you have one game sometime in April, I think people would really, really be satisfied with that and really just keep up with the team. And hey, that's content that you can do versus just a standard little spring game with it. But hey, that was a thought someone proposed, and I really do like that idea. It's not my own idea, but I really do like that. And hey, it works out for everybody at that point. Now let's focus on the game. Overall, the offense had 824 yards of total offense to Western Carolina's 178. Again, the box score really does reflect that OU just absolutely steamrolled this team. And so far, they had 45 points in the first half alone, which everybody expected. Everyone expected OU to light this team up. They already lost their first game. OU took care of business. And I think that's the running theme with this is they're taking care of business. They're making sure that they're going through their routes correctly. They're getting people in correctly and getting everyone settled in as we look forward to Nebraska next week. Just a couple key notes from it. Rattler looked like he finally settled down and has more confidence in his O-line and the pocket. Even against Western Carolina, he scored 5 TDs in the one game, and that's pretty impressive on its own at that point. And it also showed that Rattler was not forcing his throws. He was making very, very precise throws, which gives us a lot more, I guess, breathers going forward in the games with it, where before, when he was throwing off his back foot, it almost seemed like a lot of the throws were high risk, high reward type of throws. If he plays like this during the rest of the season, hey, I have a lot of confidence with him currently as quarterback. I didn't have as much criticism against him as other people did with Tulane, but that all being said, it's good to see him like making improvements, seeing like he didn't have a game that he wanted to have of good quality and make the improvements in this game for it. Because again, this is the game to do that. We also saw Caleb Williams come in the second half, and a lot of people weren't impressed with Caleb Williams, but he's not the starter. Yes, he's the second string. He made an impressive 59-yard run, but there's not really a whole lot that he's done so far. I don't have any blame for him for having just an underwhelming game or an underwhelming performance at that point. But that's just me. I think that Caleb is going to have more than enough opportunities later in the season, especially if we're going to use him kind of like the Blake Belldozer packages. I think the big story for the offensive, we were able to see Hudson and Knowles get reps. If you saw my last week's preview and post game, I really wanted those guys to get reps because I really felt like because they played around with Tulane, didn't take them seriously, were already eating hot dogs on the sidelines, they were forced to keep all the starters, and that was valuable experience that both of those players needed. Luckily for us, Hudson and Knowles definitely showed up. Knowles had 4 carries, 37 yards for 2 touchdowns. And based on what I read, I believe he was the one that everybody was excited about, and really do believe that he's going to be the star or the third string, especially once he had 2 receptions for 65 yards as well. Hudson had 9 carries for 25 yards and 2 TDs as well. As they also said too, Gray looked a lot better today versus last week. I attribute a lot of last week to the O-line. This week, he looked much better at that point. Concerning the wide receivers, Drake Stoops' return, Mims looked like he's okay from that pretty hard hit he had in the last game. Hazelwood was like the highlight reel for all the wide receivers tonight when he had those 2 great touchdowns that made replays. And not to mention that 13 players overall were able to catch the ball. We really were spreading the ball around, and I really do like that. I hate when we focus on like 1 or 2 players. I really like all the players getting the reps at this point. And finally, Burkitt was doing Burkitt things. He kicked a 56-yarder at this point. So there's really not too much about to say about the offense. Now, switching gears to the defense, though, defense really showed up as well. And again, they shut him out. There's only so much you can say on a shutout game with it. 30 players got to start or got to play against Western Carolina, which is 7 more versus Tulane. I preface that saying I don't really know what the average is of like how many people or players rotate in the lineups at that point for relief, waiting, and giving them a quick rest for it. But 30 players is still an astronomically high amount to me. I think that's good giving those guys reps. It really just helps later in the season as we get into Big 12 conference play at this point. The defense also had 2 fumbles and 1 interception. So, hey, I'm always for getting the turnovers and getting them used to getting those turnovers. Even if it's against FCS, it's still hard to get the turnovers at that point. The only other thing that was worth mentioning is Stutzman got hurt during the game. There's no telling what he got hurt with because I've heard everything from he hurt his head to he broke his arm to he has spaghetti knee. We don't know what he is hurt with. We'll probably know on Tuesday from Lincoln Riley's press conference at this point, but there's no reason to speculate for it if we don't know. The same thing with Billy Bowman. Billy Bowman apparently went out during the first series and did not return. I wonder if it was like, I think I read that it was like a hamstring issue with it, but hey, who knows on it? We'll have to see what Lincoln Riley says on Tuesday. If he does at all, who knows with it before Nebraska at this point. And finally, unlike last week where Perrion Winfrey had a quiet game, he had a very dominant game this week. And I think I read that he had 1.5 sacks and is really going to eat Nebraska's lunch next week at this point. But that all being said, like I said, this game really didn't have a whole lot that I was missing out on despite being a pay-per-view game. We got pretty much what we expected from it. OU took care of business. They named the score, and we were able to get a lot of our guys rep at this point. I was more interested in what else was going on in the Big 12, especially Iowa and Iowa State. Like I said in my preview video, as well as my picks with my friends, I picked Iowa to beat Iowa State. I have the same mentality of Iowa versus Iowa State as I do with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Iowa State cannot get over the Iowa hump, and it showed last night, especially how much Iowa dominated them just on the line of scrimmage. Iowa State did not look good last night, and so much that they benched Purdy. That's pretty telling that I think that Iowa State has a long road ahead of them. I think they're going to win games, and they're going to be a tough opponent for us regardless. But I think that was very, very, very telling at this point. And this really just gives me more confidence that OU is going to run the table in the Big 12 at this point. But that's all she wrote for this post-game video. Next week, we've got Nebraska, and I've been going back and forth on it, but I have finally decided, and I'm happy to say I will be attending the game next week. Due to the high rate of Delta and COVID, despite being vaccinated, I was really worried of attending the game with 88,000 other people with who knows what, who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated, who's currently positive. But I finally decided, based on the current rates in Oklahoma, I think it's good enough that I'm going to go wear a mask to the game, but I am going to attend the OU Nebraska game. It's going to be fun because it's going to be the first game I've attended in 2 years. And hey, what better way to attend than having the classic matchup between OU and Nebraska at this point? We will definitely see how much OU is going to open up a can of whoopass on Nebraska next week at this point. Additionally, going forward, I was going to initially, as mentioned in my first video, do a season preview video. And while the season previews are fun, there's only so much you can gauge at this point, because with the season preview videos, you're kind of predicting who's going to be there without seeing any of the games, without seeing any of the players. So instead, I'm going to take it of different quarters at this point. So after the Nebraska game, I'll be doing an extra video of recapping OU's first quarter of the season with Tulane, Western Carolina, and Nebraska, and also just previewing the next 3 games after that, which I believe is West Virginia, Kansas State, and Texas at that point with it. But I think that gives a better picture of previews at this point versus throwing everything at the beginning outside of saying, okay, this is what we predicted in the beginning, this was the end result. I think there's more of a story to tell if we did it this way at that point. And finally, guys, final reminder is tonight, and about, well, if this video is getting uploaded here in a couple minutes, I would say here in about an hour, I'm going to have a OU Western Carolina and week 2 recap with Gavin and Onikuno. A link will be in the comments. I really hope y'all come out and enjoy it. We have a fun time just chit-chatting about the games and looking forward to what's happening in the following week at this point, especially with Nebraska coming up next week and Big 12 expansion on the menu at this point. Again, comment, rate, and subscribe. As I keep mentioning in all my videos, the goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That's still 4 months away, but I'm an ambitious person. And despite that only being 4 months, I think I can reach 1,000. I really, really, really do think I can. And hey, every subscriber I am grateful for, because that just encourages me to make more content and upload more content for y'all. Finally, guys, as I keep saying for each one, get vaccinated. I think for Oklahoma, based on what the Oklahoma Department of Health is saying, we're starting to plateau a bit, and it even looks like we may be decreasing. Again, that's ultimately what changed my opinion to go to the game at this point, despite our high hospitalization rates and ICU rates. I do think it is safe for me to go to that game for myself. I cannot speak for anybody else at this point with it. But again, for every person that gets vaccinated, that's one less opportunity for Delta or another mutation to infect that person and get even worse at this point. So again, guys, get vaccinated. I highly encourage you all to do it. But that's all I got, guys. So Boomer Sooner, and there's only one Oklahoma.